guitar, Rich Syracuse on bass, and Jeff Siegel on drums. They will perform for you this evening. They will be also giving little bits of information in between, and there will be a Q&A option. I hope that our Zoom continues to work. We had a few difficulties at the beginning, and the screen kept on freezing. It wasn't actually, we don't actually know what the problem is. So if anything happens and we go out for a minute, we will be back on, so no worries. So without further ado, I will give the microphone over to Rich Syracuse to begin the show.
Thank you, Anastasia. Appreciate that. And welcome. We go by the name of John Simon's Greater Uptown Ellenville Jazz Orchestra with a big smile on our face. We've been playing with John here in Ellenville at the Aroma Time for a number of years, Jeff Siegel and I, and Steve is the guy who fills in for John when he heads south. So we proudly use that moniker. But again, Steve Raleigh on guitar and the great Jeff Siegel on drums. We're going to play a variety of music for you today, and we're going to have a little discussion about the music itself. So we'll see you in a minute. Okay, you want to go ahead? Just make noise up here, thanks. Are you ready?
Yeah, right on it?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 1, 2.
Okay. No problem. Yeah. All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Steve Raleigh on guitar, Jeff Siegel on drums. I'm Rich Syracuse on bass. Yeah, it's going directly to the computer, I guess.
You have to turn it up.
I have to speak up?
No, you have to turn around.
Oh, I thought you did. Okay, I got it. Is that better? Oh, there we go. Okay. Steve Raleigh on guitar, Jeff Siegel on drums, my dear friends. I'm Rich Syracuse. So we opened the set with a song by one of the great one of the greats in jazz lineage, if I can say that, Wayne Shorter, a song called United. Wayne obviously came of age when the great jazz music was making its many crossovers, and he himself became perhaps one of the great composers in the music, I think. And then we followed that by a song by Steve Raleigh, another one of my favorite composers, and that was a song called One for Vic, and that was for Vic Juris. He wrote that for Vic Juris. Look at the camera, of course. I'm looking at my friends on stage here. We're going to play a song for you now by Vernon Duke, and it's called April in Paris. I got it. I can keep it.
I guess you just put it in.
Ready? Right off.
Like that. Just like that.
Yep.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4.
So, the term jazz basically is an interpretive word. And basically what it refers to, the way I was told, actually by the great Mose Allison, in case anybody remembers him, I was on a gig with him once and he turned to me, he goes, "You know where the term jazz comes from?" And I said, "No, where?" And he said, "It comes from when piano players used to play in speakeasies, and they wanted to warn that, like when liquor was illegal or things like that, they wanted to warn that the police were coming, or so the piano player, they would say, tell the pianist to jazz it up." Meaning he was playing a popular song, and he was pretty much playing it the way it was written. But the idea behind jazzing it up meant that he would improvise on it, to jazz it up. That was April in Paris. Now we're going to do a song written by Steve called She Shells, She Sells. And this is a song that's written out with a melody and some chord changes that then we play on. That is the essence of jazz music, although it has always been popular music. Almost everything you listen to today, anything that you listen to today is really kind of owes its musical background to jazz, and the style and the flavor of the whole jazz concept, if you will, of improvising. Let's try it.
It's hard to pronounce as it is to play.
Although I did get it right. Right?
Yeah. And then we just vamp out at the end on the keyboard.
Let's go into that.
You want some on this? Or?
Sure.
Okay.
Everything's coming through. This and that.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4.
they think of jazz, I know when I was growing up in the early 70s, I was invited to this this kid I grew up with. His father was I guess a social worker, but he also played jazz. And on Sunday afternoons, he would have his friends over. They would make a spread of food, and they would jam. Somebody would write music, arrangements, and we were teenagers, and we used to go over, bring our instruments, and play with these guys. Now, this would have been 74, 75. So, like 50 years back would have been Dixieland. So that's what they were digging. It was like Dixieland music. So now in 2021, 50 years back would have been 1970. So for us, I mean the three of us on stage, and maybe even some of you in the audience, depending on how old you are, that was a coming of age in jazz because everything went electric. The 60s was a revolutionary time, and it was that way for music as well. And the concept of electronic instruments had a moniker of rock and roll. That's what they called it in the 70s. People like Miles Davis with their electric bands, the great Chick Corea, Return to Forever, Herbie Hancock, Joe Zawinul with Weather Report, Wayne Shorter was in that group. A lot of great songs that he wrote for that band. This was a major change in the music, and it was still based around fantastic compositions. It was still based around virtuoso musicianship, and it was new, and it was changing, and it was constantly evolving. They invented amplifiers in Woodstock. The festival came and went, and there were bands that would have, like, the Grateful Dead had the wall of sound, like amplifiers. This was the 60s into the 70s. So the jazz musicians realized that they had to keep pace. All the great musicians did it. Ray Charles, Aretha Franklin, Miles Davis. So when you hear us play, what I mean by us, the current generation, whether they're 13 years old or they're 70, they're influenced by the music that came before them. And like in the 70s, the music that these guys were coming before them were like basically Dixieland, of course, big band, swing, maybe a little bit of bebop. Bebop was still fairly new to some of those people in the 70s, Now we have it all incorporated with everything we hear. I would tell you that when I first heard rap music in Harlem, where I lived in the late 70s, guys would bring their mother's stereo sets out on the on the fire escapes. I lived on 122nd Street, and there would be 2 or 3 guys and they would battle each other with their parents' records or whatever records, Marvin Gaye, all these great gospel records, Aretha Franklin. I think even some Jackson 5, I think that was like hot, the whole thing. And what they did is they played songs against each other. And then after a while, like people that were standing around digging this, there was always like that just incredibly talented individual who just started to like rap. They felt like they had to do something, And when I heard that for the very first time, I realized what I was witnessing was, the next incantation of jazz music. They were improvising. It was fantastic. And here we are 50 years later, and this is everything that we listen to has the influence of jazz. Everything, because jazz is what came first. Jazz was the popular music of the world after opera. And it came about mostly because of some of the great descendants of African slaves who had an incredible talent. They had an opportunity to be who they were with the music. By the sheer Jim Crow law, they weren't allowed to sing in the operas. They weren't allowed to play in the theater orchestras. But from that ugliness rose incredibly talented people that created an art form and literally impacted our lives today in 2020, almost 100 years later. Something to think about. To me, it's a powerful side to this music that I always pay respect to when I play it. So, Hoagie Carmichael and Johnny Mercer. This is a beautiful song called Skylark. So that was a popular song of its age. And it was performed and sung by many of the great artists of its time. Jazz history, the history of jazz is really the history of this country, and specifically, really the history of New York in a lot of ways. Because a lot of this stuff happened in New York. It happened everywhere: Chicago, St. Louis, New Orleans, West Coast, without a doubt, great musicians all over Europe. But New York had an allure, and it still has an allure, even though it has its ups and downs. The great Miles Davis, as a young man, was enamored with what he imagined was happening in New York. And he made quite a stir and became one of its great residents, great creative residents. And we're going to play a song from his, I guess you would consider this his bebop era, Milestones, the original Milestones?
Yeah.
His bebop era, right?
Bebop era.
Yeah, there you go.
That wakes up. Yeah, that's good. That's 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4.
So did you say you want to do a question and answer? Is that happening?
More interested?
Anybody interested? Anybody have any questions? One question, yes? And we thank you for joining us tonight. Let's have a wonderful hand for Jazz at Market Street. Wonderful production. We appreciate it. COVID has taken a big bite out of live performances, so this seems to be the go-to, which is actually very cool, as long as you support it. Question?
What type of guitar is Steve's?
Oh.
What type of guitar is this? This is an Italian-made guitar. Oh, sorry.
Don't worry, mind my COVID.
Oh, right.
Does that work? Okay, there we go. This is a handmade Italian guitar by a gentleman named Nico Maffa. And it's all hand-built. I think it's about 4 or 5 years old. And yeah, a beautiful, lovely instrument. So thank you for that question. Thank you.
Any more questions?
No other questions at all? Do we have time for another song?
I think we can do one more song. I just wanted to say one
Okay,
more
we're going to give
thing.
you back to Anastasia. Thank you very much.
Thank you everyone for coming. We're sorry for the fluctuation of the volume. We have absolutely no idea what the problem was because we didn't change anything. It makes it very apparent that we need a soundboard with somebody managing it during our performances. However, what I forgot to say before was this concert was also co-sponsored by the Ellenville Library, so I wanted to thank them. This is in honor of Jazz Appreciation Month, which April is. And I will not say any more. I would like to close out the program with the last song with the Greater Ellenville Jazz Orchestra. Thank you so much for coming.
You want to start like with a little calypso group?
We're going to say goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that's it?